A Brexit could push the UK to the back of the queue for trade deals with the US if it left the EU. That's according to President Obama. Well, his comments have certainly pushed a leave vote to the back of the queue among IG clients, with the IG binary now showing over 70% betting on a stay vote. Neil McKinnon from VTB Capital is with us now. Thanks very much for coming in. What have you made of the latest polls?
Well, I think the opinion polls are showing that the Project Fear campaign, if you want to call it that, is proving quite successful, and President Obama's threats of putting us at the back of the queue, even though we're the world's fifth biggest economy, seems to have struck a chord as far as the polls are concerned. I think what's interesting is that certainly, the prospect of all kinds of apocalyptic things happening economically is weighing on voters, particularly the don't knows in the opinion polls. But the scale of the polls, which is tipped in favour of the Remain camp, is now looking a little bit lopsided. So I'm just wondering, as we get closer to the actual referendum date, whether this is the best it gets for the Remain camp. But there's no doubt that this sort of the scaremongering that's gone on, I think it's actually been overstated to a large degree, is having an effect on what people think about which way they're going to vote in the referendum.
We've already seen the hiring being put on hold. How has the dynamic really changed the UK sort of landscape? Well,
I think it's interesting because if you recall the run-up to the Scottish referendum last year and the uncertainty that we saw in the opinion polls and possibility that the independence camp might actually win, did have an effect on the overall UK economy. And there was no doubt last year that many companies put investment plans on hold, they put hiring plans on hold, and we had a little bit of a dip in the economy and then a subsequent recovery. And I think it's the same sort of dynamic that's happening this time around. It's all perfectly understandable because of all the uncertainty that the campaign itself creates. I mean, it's
not just markets that don't like uncertainty, it's people, full stop, isn't it? Yeah.
But there's always uncertainty. That's life. It's a question of how you manage it and what sort of scale we're talking about. But it is understandable that given all the focus that there's almost going to be the end of the world as we know it if there's a Brexit, that companies are saying, well, look, let's see how the land lies, because we may have to do something completely different. So there is going to be an impact on the economy. We'll probably see that in the GDP numbers that are published this week. That is going to be mirrored across the board, by the way, in the States as well, and in the Eurozone, where we're just seeing this slowdown. And I think that during the second quarter, we'll probably see continued softness. So much does depend on the outcome of the referendum and whether the economy can then recover or maybe just stay the same. There's so many scenarios about what happens that I suspect not a great deal does happen in the final conclusion.
Let's look at some of the scenarios. I mean, and the impact. Obviously, the impact on sterling we've seen already. Every time there's a comment, we've seen the moves there. But the impact overall on the markets, on the economy. Let's look at a stay vote, for instance.
Well, I think if there's a stay vote, then it's probably business as usual. So we'd see a resumption of hiring plans, a resumption of investment plans. The currency would probably go up. I think the market's very one way. Everyone's short sterling. It's an easy trade. What do? Oh, sell sterling because there's a Brexit or there's uncertainty. I mean, I think that you could see quite a bounce back in the currency, which coincidentally is not good news for UK exporters, and it makes the Bank of England's job of reaching their inflation target a little bit more difficult. So actually we might want a weaker pound to help rebalance the economy and to help with our current account deficit, which is clearly quite high as a percent of GDP. So there are umpteen scenarios about how this plays out. I suspect if we have a yes vote, has already been discounted, I think, in the markets, and probably not a great deal actually happens in the economy. I think it's more of a question what happens to the EU, because some commentators are saying, well, actually, the result of the Brexit referendum at the end of the day doesn't really alter things as far as the EU is concerned, which is seen as a sort of a dysfunctional setup and has got the migrant crisis, for example, has got problems about how does it escape this low growth, high unemployment trap that it's been in for years. So, there's bigger problems that affect the viability, longer term viability of the EU, which is could be a key issue.
Yeah, and of course, if it is a no vote, which of course our binaries are not pointing towards at the moment, is it literally back to the drawing board?
Well, it could well be.
How do you trade it?
It may well be, again, not a great deal happens, surprisingly, because if there is a vote for a Brexit, then Article 50 of the EU treaty then comes into play, and that obliges the EU to enter a negotiation with the UK government over a 2-year period. So it may well be that not a great deal happens, and there's
another 2 years of uncertainty,
another 2 years of negotiation, another 2 years of uncertainty. I mean, the out camp would say, well, actually, we're the 5th biggest economy in the world. We've been the fastest growing economy in the G7. The idea that we're a little dot on the outpost of Europe and that we don't matter anymore, either politically or economically, I think is ludicrous. We are an important trading economy. The scenario of Mercedes or BMW all of a sudden not wanting to sell cars to us.
HSBC moving its headquarters again.
Where to? Are they going to go to Paris? Paris, Brussels, Frankfurt, Berlin are not global financial centres. London is. It's the number 1 global financial centre. So the scenarios where it's almost apocalyptic, I think, are ludicrously overstated. And I think if there is an outvote, yes, the optimistic scenario is that this liberates the economy. That's what Michael Gove has been arguing. Frees us from getting sucked ever deeper into more EU regulation, the dead hand of Brussels, getting sucked into an economic model which is, it has to be said, on any criteria, has not been a success story. So it may well be that there is a positive twist to all this. It's not the end of the world, that we do wake up after a Brexit and we're all alive and well and the economy's not collapsed around our ears. We shall see.
We will indeed. Thanks very much, Neil McKinnon there from VTB Capital on his views ahead of the EU referendum after the latest polling data from Survation.